was born into a prosperous Philadelphia family. Though she was a shy child, she would live her life in the public eye.
Don't try to be a hero. You don't have to be a hero, not for me.
I'm not trying to be a hero.
By the age of 23, her beauty and talent took her to Hollywood. She made 11 films in 3.5 years and became one of the most sought-after stars of her time. She worked with Hollywood's most important directors, played opposite its top leading men.
There's nothing quite so mysterious and silent as a dark theater.
Then, at 26, she turned her back on make-believe. But make-believe came true in a fairy tale shared by the entire world. Her name was Grace Kelly. It became Her Serene Highness, Princess Grace of Monaco.
I think Grace really believed that she was going to give up acting when she became Princess Grace of Monaco. I think that the reality of that probably struck her someplace in the middle of the Mediterranean after the honeymoon began.
She took everything so much in her stride. Nothing seemed to be too much for her.
Her very name, Grace, could not have been more fitting. And even her death, her tragic early death, made her enter even more into legend.
Monaco, a principality of less than 500 acres on the French Riviera. For centuries, the Monegasques had held on to their distinctive character and their pride. But to the world, this place was known as a playground for the wealthy, who came to enjoy its beauty and its gambling. Monaco became the home of the young American actress who arrived in 1956 to be its princess. She brought her fame, her cool beauty, her intelligence. And she brought more, a sense of purpose. For this storybook princess was firmly anchored in reality. A reality that had its origins back in Philadelphia. Competition came easily to the Kellys. Here along Kelly Drive, named after Grace's father, John B. Kelly, they still race in the sport for which Jack Kelly won an Olympic medal. A statue erected by the citizens of Philadelphia commemorates that achievement. Jack Kelly's father was a bricklayer from Ireland who went on to make a fortune. Young Jack soon joined the family business, construction and brickmaking. He started his own business and made his own fortune, but he always professed pride in his family's humble origins. Jack Kelly believed the world was what you made it. Margaret Major, who married Jack, had been a model as well as a champion swimmer and athlete. Margaret and Jack were determined to raise their children their own way. If you're good enough, you're sure to reach the top. It was drilled into the Kelly children from their earliest years.
As a family, we were always very close. 4 of us. Peggy, my sister, is the oldest. My brother Jack, Grace, and then myself. She was the baby for 3.5 years and loved every minute of it. Grace, when she was young, was very shy and a mama's baby. There are many times that we have pictures taken that mother had to lean back away from the camera so Grace would not cry to be taken away from her mother. She was very sweet and soft and loved to be held and cuddled and kissed and loved. I, on the other hand, and I think my brother and older sister were more don't get around me. We want to do our own thing. We always had a place at the shore when we were young, and at that time, I think we had our best times together. We just had a marvelous time, and Grace, all her life, loved to be by the ocean and the sea. Grace and all the family, we were a competitive family. I think we got that. I know we got that from our mother and our father. They instilled into us a deep sense of competition and the love of sports, the thrill of winning, but also taught us how to lose gracefully.
But the Kellys didn't intend to lose, and there never was a better drill master than Jack Kelly. It was fun, family fun, and it left a special kind of determination.
The determination didn't manifest itself in Grace as much in the sporting field. But her determination sort of took another turn. She loved to sit by the hours and pretend and create situations and say, Lizzie, you do this, and I'll be this, and I'll be the mother, and you be the baby. And, of course, I gave her a hard time a lot of times because I did not want to play her games.
For Grace, growing up wealthy meant winter sport in Lake Placid. It also meant the best private schools. Working for causes you believed in started young, with modeling at society fashion benefits. But for Grace, these shows meant more than fundraising. They were theater.
She got most of her love from the theater from my Uncle George. He was a playwright and he directed plays.
Very gracious, highly educated person, well-read, and very witty.
And she just was fascinated with all the tales of the stage and the theater.
Her Uncle George Kelly was a great example to her. He was sensitive and kind and talented, and I think of all the men she ever knew, rather than going for the athletic macho type, I think her ideal man was her Uncle George.
My recollections of her father, John B., Jack Kelly, were of an enormous man with a tremendous amount of gusto. Everything up front, everything in the open, move ahead. Nice man, but not a tremendous amount of internal sensitivity.
Her father believed absolutely that Peggy, the older sister, was going to make the big star of the family and succeed. And he never paid any attention to Grace, who was in the middle of the family, these 4 children. And she was quiet, observant of the others, and adored her older brother, too, also Kel, John B. Kelly, Jr., and also Olympic star, great racer, so the father thought he was great. But Grace he just accepted. And I don't think he understood her at all. But she adored him.
And yet one wonders, when you don't get from a parent what it is perhaps you need, if that isn't what creates a great deal of the drive in you to go out and become the fullest part of yourself.
She decided to go to New York. And my mother and father especially surprised, because she was a shy and retiring girl. My mother and father were a little leery of New York and on her own, but Mother said, Jack, it's not as if she's going to Hollywood or to California.
Grace knew that her father didn't think very much of an acting career.
They allowed her to go to get it out of her system. Let her go. It won't amount to anything.
Grace was accepted into the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, then housed in Manhattan's Carnegie Hall. It was 1947, and Grace Kelly was 18 years old.
She supported herself by modeling. She got her portfolio, and little by little she started getting jobs.
So that she didn't have to ask for the favor of being supported in her efforts, so that she could justify her own existence by her own earning power.
Grace also appeared in commercials. She was the girl next door, the girl men hoped they could marry. After graduating from the American Academy, Grace found parts in stock companies and her first professional role in her Uncle George Kelly's play, The Torchbearers. Then came her first Broadway role in a Strindberg play.
And we all went up from Philadelphia to see the opening night. And Dad did not know that Raymond Massey was in the play. Grace introduced her father to Raymond. He said, "Oh, Jack, how are you?" And he said, "Is this your daughter?" I did not know that. So she did everything on her own and did not want any help from any of the family. Because she said, if I don't do it myself, I don't want to do it at all.
I was very taken with the way she looked and the way she walked, and especially her lovely voice. She had a beautiful voice.
Except for the speech was not yet, as an actress, blended with her posture, with that stately figure that she projected.
She studied. She really applied herself to the characters that she was working on.
I met Grace Kelly early in her career, back in 1950, when I was directing Danger for CBS television. Her mother came up, and I think her brother came up to watch a rehearsal, and when the rehearsal was over, I heard her mother say, "Darling, your speech is affected a little bit. Can you kind of make it more natural?" And she said, "Mother, I'm working on it."
Your city is full of sound. Listen.
I don't hear a thing.
Well, there's an automobile going past, and a horse, and a boat in the harbor.
She played the lead in The Rich Boy for me.
The Leviathan.
I'll take you.
Where?
Under the pressures of live television, no retakes, no ability to go back and change.
Television, when they had flats fall down on tea tables and everybody was out there improvising.
She performed absolutely brilliantly and very quickly became one of the leading members of the so-called stock company, those actors that we would tend to cast over and over again.
Basic, I would say. I must sound very snobbish about the West.
Oh, no, I'm interested. I just never thought about it that way.
Well, people in the West are more open.
I'm open.
That's because you've had a lot to drink. You drink a lot, don't you?
No.
Well, I was watching you from across the room. You kept filling your glass every few minutes.
You were watching me?
And so are most of the other girls. Some men are like that. They compel attention.
I didn't even see you until just a few minutes ago. Then I couldn't wait to be introduced.
Some men are like that.
The first time I saw Grace, I would be hard-pressed to describe her as the glamour queen of the world. During a rehearsal, she had a pair of glasses on, and they were just a little bit down her nose, and she had a terrible cold, and she was quite withdrawn. I remember we shook hands, but it wasn't a very hearty handshake. It was the handshake of a little girl, and I thought, ooh, what a nice school teacher. She's from Philadelphia, and that was my first impression of Grace.
Grace was given a small part in the movie 14 Hours, in which she was hardly noticed. She returned to television and to stock theater. Her big break came, almost by chance.
I met Grace in 1953, actually going through the receiving line of my wedding to my then-husband, Jay Cantor, who was her agent.
I was intrigued by her looks in the photographs that Edie sent me, by her background, and probably more by the fact that she absolutely would not accept a long-term studio contract.
He was a young agent, I was a young producer, and he had brought to me Marlon Brando. Then he sent me a photograph of Grace Kelly at the time we were casting High Noon. Now, I wanted an unknown girl. I asked to see her. She came in from Denver for an interview for a part in a Western with white gloves, no less.
That goes way back when we were children. My mother insisted every time we went into town, you wore hat and gloves. That not only my mother, we were brought up as in a convent, and the nuns insisted that you wore white gloves on special occasions.
I went overboard because she had that ladylike quality, that kind of dignity which was in contrast to the Western scene, which worked so well vis-a-vis Cooper.
Your lawful wedded husband to have and to hold from this day forward.
The reason I think she was miscast is that Cooper was much older than Grace Kelly. He was too old for Kelly, actually, in the role. She didn't believe that she did well in the film. I didn't think so either. There was a girl in the film named Cati Jurado who played a Mexican gal in the town. Cati Jurado was dynamic and overpowering. And yet, Kelly wasn't swallowed, even in her miscast, because this ladylike thing came through.
They were killed by guns. They were on the right side, but that didn't help them any when the shooting started. My brother was 19. I watched him die.
For Grace Kelly was her first big break, and for me was my first American picture making here in Hollywood. I was 2 years old, she was. I have 7 years making pictures in Mexico. There was something so different between Grace and I. We could not really explain, that we could not be very close, but I could see a girl with a lot of dignity and a lot of character, because she wants to be somebody in movies. And she was very hard in that picture. She looked weak, very tiny, but she was a very strong person. I believe that she was one of the strongest movie stars I worked with. She knew what she wants, and she did it.
Gary Cooper went on to win an Academy Award for Best Actor of 1952. But there were no laurels for Grace, and she promptly headed back to New York for more study. She was a Kelly, and she had to do better.
We've all probably read that thing where she says that you can see everything in Gary Cooper's eyes, but that her eyes were flat and dull and dead, and that she didn't like them. She couldn't tell what the character was feeling.
She began to work harder on concentrating on her objective. In other words, that would eventually be the cure for the way she attacked her characters, to make them come alive, to make her eyeballs shine with meaning.
She always had this inner image of being, an old-fashioned actress with the kind of glamour that you have on Broadway.
Grace was eager for a lead role in a New York production of Cyrano de Bergerac.
I wanted to have Grace as Roxanne. I wanted her, not because of her great acting ability, but because of that discipline that she appeared to have.
Unfortunately, she never did realize that. Every part she went up for on Broadway, with the exception of the father, she lost.
And when she didn't get it, there were mentions of it in the columns and so forth and so on. She was really very, very distressed. And she picked herself up and went on.
Mogambo was a picture that Grace apparently wanted to do very badly, because she was willing to sign a long-term contract with MGM to do the picture.
Is that all you're going to do for him?
What do you expect me to do, Mrs. Nordley? Crawl in bed with him and hold his hand?
The thought of playing opposite a star like Clark Gable, being directed by John Ford, a fellow Irishman, and I also think she was intrigued with the idea of going to Africa.
On location for Mogambo, Clark Gable described an incident to Rupert Allen, then Look magazine correspondent. Grace was alone and was discovered by Gable.
She turned to him, he saw that she was crying. And he said, "Well, why are you crying, Grace?" She said, "So beautiful. I'm reading The Snows of Kilimanjaro by Hemingway, and I looked up, and I was just reading about this frozen leopard, I think they found, way up in the snows of this high mountain, highest mountain in Africa. And I looked up in my book, thinking about what a beautiful picture it was, and said Hemingway, and there I saw a lion walking along the seashore. It was just too beautiful."
She gave human personalities to her animals, and very often she gave animal personalities to humans. She used to call some of her close friends bird. I remember she called Rita bird, Jay bird, this bird, that bird. I mean, people and animals became interchangeable with Grace.
Grace's role in Mogambo earned her an Academy Award nomination as Best Supporting Actress of 1953.
What are you saying? You're drunk.
You know how it is on safari. It's in all the books. The woman always falls for the white hunter, and we guys make the most of it. Do you blame us? Well, when you come along with that look in your eye, and the guy...
Some critics called her a star in the making. Few realized how luminous that star would become, and in how short a time. Hollywood, as far as Jack and Margaret Kelly were concerned, was no place for a girl on her own.
On Sundays, many times, we used to go to church, and then Uncle George, who lived in Southern California, would come pick us up and take us for a ride around and have lunch, take us to lunch. And she enjoyed those rides with George so much that the two of them would talk. I would sit in the back seat and maybe take a little nap, but the two of them would talk theater and books and poetry.
Some of the people in town, the studio heads, were quite mystified by her. They didn't understand why she didn't want to go to their dinner parties and be seated next to all the A people that young actresses should want to be seated next to.
She didn't rush out effusively and reach forward to make lots and lots and lots of friends.
She got up 5 o'clock in the morning, went on the set, came home and grabbed something to eat, usually a hamburger, which was Gracie's favorite food, and then went to bed.
She was always charming. She was never cold. She was never icy to anybody on the set.
She could give that appearance of coolness, of being sort of above it all at all times. But inside, she was very often seething. And she was a volatile person, but always under control.
Alfred Hitchcock used to say about Grace Kelly, with his usual wit, that her apparent frigidity was like a mountain covered with snow, but that the mountain was a volcano.
In 1953, director Hitchcock found in Grace his perfect heroine.
There was a scene in The Dial M for Murder where he wanted her to answer the phone by putting on her bathrobe. And she said there was no reason for her to put a bathrobe on just to answer a telephone with no one else in the house but her. And he said, what would you wear? He said, I'd wear the nightgown. So he said, all right. And it worked out very well.
Hello.
She seemed to know the movements before Hitchcock had anything to say about it. And I think Hitchcock liked that. I think everybody liked it. In the picture Rear Window, Hitchcock said, now to Grace, now you're going to have to go across and go get into the room. And Grace, without any direction, she just went over, climbed up the fire escape, climbed in one of the windows and sneaked into the door, and then looked over across the way to Hitchcock and said, is that what you mean? Well, everybody applauded, and she deserved it because this was exactly what Alfred Hitchcock wanted.
What Grace brought as an actress was Grace brought the actual young woman of the 50s into a vision of glamour. It was a very proper era in a way, a very prim era. Underneath that, of course, there was always the sense of flirtatiousness of young women and the sense of fun.
Grace had truly arrived. She appeared on the covers of national magazines. But success meant more time spent in Hollywood.
She was really a family person. She didn't like to be alone. I remember when she first went to California to make films, she lived alone. And suddenly she asked Rita Gam to come and live with her.
And Grace let me in, and there she was. She was wearing the same Philadelphia skirt, same sensible shoes, the same tied back hair, except now she was becoming a very valuable property. And I had no idea that her background was one of opulence. I thought of her as a co-worker, an actress. Then, out of the clear blue sky, and very directly, openly, and warmly, she said, "Would you like to share the flat? How would that fit in with your schedule?" I said, "Well, I have to get up at 5 in the morning." She said, "I have to get up at 5 too." I said, "Well, both go to sleep at 9." She said, "Terrific. That's it."
I think the thing that most people forget is that when all of this was happening to Grace, this extraordinary excitement about her career being generated and roles with the world's most famous leading men and the world's most respected directors, she was just a girl in her early 20s.
One time in Hollywood, Grace and I were invited to what turned out to be a rather sticky dinner party with 2 bachelors. We had thought it was going to be this grand party with an awful lot of people, and there we were, and the lights were getting lower, and the wine was getting heavier, and I was getting very nervous. And I nudged Grace under the table. Grace had her glasses on. I think that was her protection. Mine was just to sort of chatter nervously and say, let's go, Grace." And she whispered back, "Let's wait until after dessert. It might be good."
The bridges at Toko-Ri gave Grace the opportunity to play opposite an actor she admired, William Holden.
Harry, you've got to tell me about those bridges.
The kind of concentration that a good actor was capable of would definitely infect her.
They know we're not going to fly above the mountains. We're going to fly between them.
It would make her respond. And that way you could see, too, that she had a nervous system that was similar to litmus paper. She reacted immediately.
You didn't want to tell me because you didn't want me to worry. Well, I don't want you to worry either. About me, I mean. I know what the Admiral was trying to tell me. I had to face those bridges, too.
Director George Seaton was impressed by Grace's performance and wanted her for the demanding role of the wife in The Country Girl. But before releasing her, MGM insisted she appear in Green Fire,
which wasn't one of her favorite films. She was tired when she started. She had done about 6 pictures in a row, and she had to go to South America.
A film like Green Fire that absolutely made her blazing mad. I mean, she said, "This is not what I wanted to be an actress for."
But she did do it in order to get the part in Country Girl.
At the moment, all I want is for you to get dressed so we can get out of here.
Who's in New York?
Frank, I'm warning you. I'm going to hit you with the first thing I pick up.
The greatest expression of courage that Grace demonstrated was the throwing away of her mask of beauty and her elegance.
Nobody understood at all. I mean, why would this gorgeous creature want to be seen in an old tacky sweater with her hair pulled back in a bun looking haggard?
She desperately wanted to be this great actress.